Hello, welcome back to my channel. So today I went to the library to return my books, and the library that I'm in is the National Library. I borrowed 6 books and I managed to finish only 4. So I ended up extending my loan of 2 books, and I borrowed 4 new books. I'm going to show you some of the books. Well, not some. I'm going to show you all 6 of the books that I borrowed from the library today. So this video is going to be something of a library haul video. But I also want to talk about, later in this video, about one book that I read at the library. Yes, I read one book at the library in one sitting. Surprise, surprise. But yes, that did happen. And it was an experience. Okay, I'm going to tell you about that later. But first, I'm just going to talk about, I'm just going to mention about books that I borrowed. So the first 2 books are the books that I extended. Let me just locate where those books are. It's over there. So, okay. So the first book that I extended was, whose loan I extended. I didn't extend the book itself. This one is Harry Crew's The Gospel Singer. Yep, I borrowed this one 4 weeks ago, but I couldn't manage to get into this book. But hopefully this time around, this coming 4 weeks, I will be able to get to this book and hopefully enjoy it. And another one is an NYRB, a short story collection. This is called Waiting for the Fear by Oğuz Atay. So this book was originally written in Turkish. It was translated to English by Hubbell. So yeah, these 2 books, plus 4 new books that I found at the library. So the first book was this South Korean YA novel, originally written in Korean, translated to English by Sandy Joosun Lee. So this one is called Almond by Won-Pyung Sohn. Now, something about this book. Okay, I have a bit of a personal story with this book. I actually owned this book a couple of years ago, like around 2 years ago. But unfortunately, I sold it. Around that time, I was actually at home, and I already resigned a few months before that, and I was taking care of my late grandma, and she passed away quite recently. Before I sold this book. So after she passed away, I was still at home waiting for the results of my master's application. So that was around 2022-ish, 2022, 2023. And it was around that time that I got into this kind of like depressive phase. And when I got into my depressive phase, I tend to do things that were kind of out of the ordinary. And one of the things that I did at the time was I was trying to downsize my book collection. And so what I did was I kind of opened an online shop selling my books, selling my some of the books that were in my collections, especially the ones that I have read that I thought that maybe I just didn't want to hold on to anymore. But I also included some books that I have not read but thought that I would probably not read them. So this book was one of those books. And one thing that just kind of made me feel even more disappointed, by what I did was that my copy of Almond at the time was a book that I bought new. So basically, I bought it at the retail price of a new book, and I didn't get to read it because I thought that I'm probably wouldn't be reading it because I had many other books at home, and so I sold it. And then a few months after that, once I would say emotions became more stable, I regretted my decisions of selling some of those books, and yeah, that was kind of sad. So I found this at the library, and I just thought, okay, maybe this time around I have the opportunity to sort of partially correct what I did, and I hope that I can enjoy this book. So the next book that I borrowed was Butter by Asako Yuzuki. So this book, I noticed that it was quite a sensation somewhat in online bookish spaces, and it seems that this book is also quite popular at libraries. So I also go to another library here in Kuala Lumpur by Japan Foundation, where as you may have noticed, I've read quite a bunch of Japanese books lately, and it was because I went to that library. And this book also is supposed to be available at that library, but it is often not there. So yeah, I can see that this book is quite popular. So this book was originally written in Japanese, translated to English by Barton. And I don't really know what this book is going to be about, except for the fact that there is some kind of murder going on in this book, so a bit of a murder mystery, I guess. I'm not sure what's going on. And it has something to do with food and stuff. Very vague descriptions. But yeah, that's how I roll with books. Okay, so next I also found two NYRB. This one was something that I actually saw. This one I saw 1 month before at the library, but I didn't get to borrow it because I already had like 6 books in my arms. So this time I decided to grab this. This is Anton Shammas' Arabesques. So this book was originally written in Hebrew. It was translated to English by Vivian Eden, and it is a historical fiction, I think, about a Palestinian family and kind of like their experience in Israel, I guess, and how this generations of family just kind of like deal with the life there as Palestinians. I don't pay attention to the description, obviously. So I'm going to move on to the second one. Now this one is also an NYRB. This is Don't Look at Me Like That by Diana Athill, and apparently this one was kind of like a new collection at the library. So I was like, oh, exciting. So yeah, that's all I'm gonna say about the books that I bought, because I've not read them. This is also one of the reasons why I very rarely these days make haul videos, because I don't have much to talk about when it comes to hauls. But yeah, I just kind of want to mention these library hauls because I had quite an interesting experience at the library today. So on to the thing that I really wanted to talk about. I read a short novel at the library today, and it's called The Minister by Shannon Ahmad. And this book was originally written in Malay. It was translated. Let me retrieve the name of the translator first, because I don't really remember. I'm just going to pause this video. Okay, so the translator of The Minister is Ilyanna, Mohammad, Shaharul, Hashri. And I am quite interested in reading books by this author. So Shannon Ahmad was a Malaysian author, and he was also the national laureate here of literature here in Malaysia. And yeah, because of that, I'm interested in reading his oeuvre. And you know, I don't read at this point. I have not read a lot of works by Malaysian authors. So yeah, that really motivated me to kind of try and explore more. But alas, my experience with this novel was not a good one. I actually had a prior experience with this author, a book of his when I was much younger. So I'm going to talk about that later after I talk about this book. So in this novel called The Minister, which is a very short novel, we have a character named Bahadur, who is a minister, and he has a wife and a daughter and a secretary, a male secretary. Basically, these four characters are like the main character. Well, I wouldn't say main characters, like the important characters in this book. The main character is, of course, Bahadur, this minister. Now, Bahadur, one day he's just kind of like chilling at his house, rich man's house, and then he notices something on a painting that was at his house. So this painting was of a poor fisherman at the beach, and something struck Bahadur. He sort of received some kind of realization when he saw this imagery of poor fishermen on this painting, and he realizes that as a politician himself, he should be doing more for the people, especially those who are poor, represented by the fishermen. So basically, this image of this poor fisherman made him realize more about his responsibility as a politician, and he began to have some ideas inside his head about how he could bring forth better progress for poor people that are represented by this image of this fisherman. So it is a very interesting premise, and it's quite basic, but it's very interesting nonetheless. However, there were many points about this book that I just did not like. Now, first of all, I think that the way that this particular main character receives his sort of call to action, right? Basically, his personal starting point, the starting point of his personal journey towards an elevated person, enlightened person, so to speak. It felt kind of forced, and it also, to me, rings false as well. There's something that feels kind of out of touch with how this minister receives his sort of awakening. Basically, he receives the awakening from a painting at his house. and there isn't any overt mention of people who are of lower status in this book, with the exception of, I would say, the character of a maid who appears quite frequently in this novel, but somehow doesn't really participate in a very meaningful way other than being ordered around by the richer characters. And so I feel that there is something superficial about how this minister ends up having this kind of change in personality. Like, is that, does it imply that that painting was the main thing or the only thing that precipitated his change in character? Or is there anything else? Because from what I read, it just feels like it's not enough. It's so surface level, and there is something that just doesn't feel organic about this change in character that we're seeing. And so the starting point of this character change is already quite clunky to me. So now on to the second part, which also relates to this this minister main character, Bahadur. He is described as someone who is very flawed. He is written as someone who is, who has a lot of weaknesses. At the beginning especially, he is kind of portrayed as a very stereotypical, useless politician. A politician who kind of considers his job as some kind of a sinecure, and basically a politician who just kind of relax a lot, like without doing any really meaningful work. And his secretary is also described as someone who is kind of out of touch, from the common people, and he's only focusing on advancing his own career in politics. And so there is this kinds of layers of stereotypes that were assigned onto these characters, which I thought was okay if we were to see that at the beginning, because I suppose that can help to establish the characters. But somehow, I feel like the development of these characters, as their story progresses, these aspects aren't exactly addressed again. One aspect that I particularly notice is how Bahadur the minister and also his secretary, named Siddiq, who, how they interact with the female staff. There is a certain kind of ickiness with how they interact with the female staff, the kind of power dynamics that happen between them, the male characters, and also the female minor characters, that kind of suggests that they are a certain kind of men. And so I was interested to see how this novel would take this aspect of those characters as it moved forward, but it didn't really happen. Now, on to the next point that I didn't like, also related to the interactions between these male characters with those minor female characters, is also how this book writes the more important female characters in this book, who are Bahadur's wife and also Bahadur's daughter. The wife and the daughter, there is something that, the way that they're written, there's something that feels kind of contemptuous about it. Like, it feels like the author has some kind of contempt towards these characters. And it also feels like kind of misogynistic, and I just felt that, at first when I saw it at the beginning of this book, it could be because there was this it could be because this novel skews heavily on the point of view of Bahadur, even though this novel is narrated by a third-person narrator. But again, as the novel progresses, this part becomes consistent. So consistent that eventually this kind of contempt and also this sense of misogyny, it feels like it is transferred onto the voice of the narrator as well. So that part just kind of made me feel very suspicious about, okay, what is really going on in here? Is the narrator trying to assign those traits to the main character? Or is that going to be like the overarching flavor of the book? And well, could it also be something that the book espouses, embrace? I don't know, because it suspiciously to me, it feels like it is something that the book is trying to support, and that part feels very, very problematic to me. But that's not all. Last but definitely not least, and also probably one of the most important reasons why I didn't like this book, was because I didn't like the racist undertones in this book. So, this minister is described as someone who would also use racist rhetorics against his political opponents, and this was established quite early on in the novel. And again, I thought that it might as well be like part of his character at the beginning, and maybe he would experience some kind of change later in the book. But not only that change didn't happen. What's worse is that when this main character reaches the zenith of his character development, by the time he becomes like when he reaches the elevated level of his awakening, this racist aspect of this character becomes like a very integral part of him. So the kind of ideas that this character realizes as important, and indirectly what this novel considers as the main takeaway of this book, part of that package is also the racist undertones that this character carries. And to me that sounds quite problematic. And honestly, I did not like that. I just couldn't stomach that kind of writing. This book is very heavy on the idea of nationalism, and to be honest, I'm someone who is not really on board with nationalism of any brand. But I will happily read any work of literature, even if they embrace nationalism, because I don't know, I just kind of enjoy reading those stuff in a more critical way, and as long as there are something that can be distilled from it, like as long as those works, they present their ideas in a way that is interesting and you can get something out of it. You don't have to agree with everything the work of literature says, but as long as there is something you can get out of it, as long as there's something I can enjoy, then I'll enjoy it. But this book I just didn't really find much that I could enjoy, and I would even say that some of the the way that some of the ideas are written sound like dog whistles as well, and I just didn't really I just didn't like this book. It is not good, not good. And so I spent like 1.5 hours reading this book in one sitting, and I must say that it was not time well spent. Anyway, yeah, I mentioned earlier that I had an earlier encounter with the works of Shahnon Ahmad. So when I was about 9 years old, 9, 10, 11, when I was at my mom's village, I was actually kind of like snooping around cupboards to look for some reading materials because I was just bored. And so I found a novel of Shahnon Ahmad. It was in Malay, and it was called Shit. So that was the novel's title, and it was a political satire. It was a satire of the administration at the time, which was headed by Mohammad. And basically, the author just kind of portrayed the prime minister and also the ministers around him as fecal matter inside the human bowel. So, as you may expect, this book has tons and tons and tons and tons of references to poop, to excrement, to, tons of scatological things going on. I read it because I was really bored, and also because I was like 10 years old, so I just kind of like read everything. but I was able to understand that this book was some kind of critique, a political critique of the leader of the country at the time. Looking back, now that I have better vocabulary to describe my reading experience at the time, I probably didn't have the word to describe it when I was younger. I thought that the writing of Shit was quite juvenile, and it was just like pages and pages of hysterical tirades against the administration. That there was no subtlety at all about that. Because I was 10, I was able to appreciate poop jokes better. I might even say that I was really fascinated by poop jokes and poop references, because I was a kid. But yeah, looking back, I thought that book was kind of shit. Anyway, yeah, that was my experience reading this author at the library today. I really did not enjoy it. But yeah, that's all that I'm going to share with you in this video. Just a bit of what I'm currently reading at this moment, aside from the book by Vargas Llosa that I mentioned in the past in the last video. I'm still currently reading that in praise of the Stepmother. I have also started on one of the books that I borrowed, which was Almond by Won-Pyung. So yeah, thank you for listening to my long rant. And also my experience. I hope y'all have a wonderful day, and I'll see you again in a different video. So until then, take care. Thanks for listening. Bye.